we're joined by Jack Pilgrim, Kentucky Sports Radio. Jack, what is going on in the Commonwealth that has led to such angst for Calipari's program?
Losing. I think that's something that Kentucky fans have not been used to, and they will not accept. It's something that we saw a 9-16 season 2 years ago. We saw the worst postseason loss in program history the year after that, and then now a season with the reigning National Player of the Year coming back to anchor your offense. You have a Bob Cousy Award finalist leading the way at the point guard position. You have national title expectations, Final Four expectations, and you have whatever they're putting out on the floor right now. 10-6 is just not excusable. They don't look like a competent basketball team. They don't look cohesive. It's leading to about as frustrating atmosphere in Lexington than I can remember personally.
Jack, I almost expect you to open with a sign that said, "Please go to Texas" in front of you. I saw you guys tweeting about that last night with the fan being ejected. It is incredible when you run through the recent history with Kentucky that John Calipari has a job now. When you think about the expectation level at Kentucky, he's really been given a pretty long leash. I know the national championship helps, but, I mean, Jack, you know better than anyone at Kentucky, Final Fours are an expectation. You know, winning a national championship every so often is an expectation with that program, and he's not coming close to that right now.
Yeah, he's built up a lot of equity from the first, 10 years that he was in Lexington. The run that he went on 4 Final Fours in 5 years to start things up, I think created, like you said, a very long leash that unfortunately is getting shorter and shorter by the years. And, I think they gave him the benefit of the doubt with the COVID year. They gave him, the benefit of the doubt saying that last season, at their best, they looked like a national title contender, and they should have been that. Throughout the year when they beat Tennessee. Unfortunately, I know you guys favor Tennessee at home. We looked like a team that was unstoppable. And then injuries kind of got in the way. And then, nothing will ever excuse St. Peter's. But there was always kind of a built-in excuse no matter how things unfolded. This year, there's nothing. You have all the pieces. You have, a new coaching staff that Cal likes and everything. You have the veteran leadership. You have the freshman talent. You have, the length, the defense, the size, all of the stuff that should on paper result in a national title contender, but it's just not coming together the way that everybody's expecting. So I think now is when the impatience is really starting to come to a head. And I think that's where you're getting the Cal to Texas rumors and the signs at Rupp Arena.
Jack Pilgrim with us, covers the Wildcats for Kentucky Sports Radio. Is NIL part of the issue? Starting to hear, some murmurs of not that money's the issue, but allocation of funds to certain players over others. Is there anything going on behind the scenes in that regard?
I don't know if that's necessarily fair to say it's individual things because they do a lot of team NIL deals to begin with. Oscar Tshiebwe is a very unique case because of the restrictions that he had going into it. And I think a lot of it he deserved back then that I think is kind of a makeup for his inability to get NIL last season. So I don't necessarily see that, but I think it's definitely, more so how they're allocating time and, where the meetings are and the, where the commercial shoots are and showing up maybe a little bit late for practice, things like that. I don't think it's the actual money itself, but more so just the cohesiveness. Instead of going, doing team dinners and having the camaraderie and going out to movies and doing things like that. A lot of it is they're going to do TV shoots and, commercials here and there. So I do think that's been a part of it, but I do think that there's some locker room concerns right now.
Just being there on a daily basis, is Coach Cal deflecting criticism off his team more than he normally would and putting it on himself, or is it about the same?
That's kind of a funny way to put it because the way he words things a lot of the times is, he says, well, here are all the things my players did wrong. They didn't rebound well here. The defense wasn't good enough here, but don't blame my players. Don't attack my players, attack me. So it's kind of an indirect way of saying, well, I'm kind of attacking my players and, explaining where things went wrong in that regard, but still putting it on himself about where things went wrong. Last night was a big accountability push for him. He said, look, this is not where things need to be. This is not an acceptable loss. Look, South Carolina is a terrible basketball team. There is nothing acceptable about how things unfolded last night. So I at least appreciated that he went out of his way to say, what happened last night cannot happen. We can't be the gold standard of college basketball if you lose those types of games. So it kind of an indirect way. Yes, the accountability is there, but not without some digs leading up to that.
You have a season like this with all this expectation, and you're not delivering on it now. If you're Kentucky, there's plenty of places you can point the finger. On that roster, let's talk about the players, Jack. Who's been most disappointing to you? Because that's the big surprise to me is this would just be a typical year if it was just 5 freshmen starting, and they're going to get better and better as the year goes on. But there's veteran leadership on this team, and they're not playing connected at all with the 2 veterans and the rest of the roster. So who's been the biggest disappointment up to this point on that roster?
Ironically enough, I think it is your National Player of the Year. I think it is Oscar Tshiebwe. This is a kid that, was unbeatable. He was the most dominant presence in college basketball last season. I've never seen anything like it with my own 2 eyes. Shattered every single record that Kentucky basketball had to have, every national basketball record. He shattered. He comes back. And I don't know if this is, when you come back as a National Player of the Year and there are expectations, internally, I need more shots. If I'm going to come back to this program when I could go pro as a National Player of the Year, I need X number of shots or X number of minutes, or, I need to be taking threes instead, expanding my role to look better. Unfortunately, I think that has created a dynamic where everything revolves around him. It is an Oscar-centric offense where the ball has to go inside to him before anything else can happen. There's no ball movement outside of that to lead up to, clean up opportunities for Oscar that made him so dominant last season. It's actually Oscar as kind of, trying to turn him into like a Kofi Coburn style of player. And that's just not who he is. He is not this fundamentally sound, elite footwork, soft touch around the basket guy that you can throw it down low to him and let him just take games over. That's, he dominates the game in other ways by attacking the glass and being that elite cleanup specialist where you can jack up threes on the outside and have him, magnet hands down low for easy putback dunks and layups. That was what made him so special last season. And they've gotten away from that, unfortunately. There's not enough outside shooting. And unfortunately, I think they're not engaged on the perimeter because they know that, you're going to toss it inside to Oscar Tshiebwe and he's going to go to work for 20 seconds. And if you do get the ball back, it's going to be 4 seconds left on the shot clock for a heave, a prayer there at the end.
It's weird to talk about must wins in January, but we're reaching a critical point right now with Kentucky basketball. You mentioned Tennessee. I think Kentucky's this has got to be sort of not a last stand, but a big stand in this game, and a chance to get an enormous road win over a top 5 team this weekend. I know Rick Barnes talked about it and said, we know we're going to get Kentucky's best in this game. That's the expectation Tennessee is entering that game, that they want this one bad. What do you think about the chances of Kentucky rallying the troops at this point, even at an early stage in conference play, and playing great on the road against what's been a really good Tennessee team?
Sounds great on paper, but nothing about this team indicates that they're anything close to being ready for that competition. They are 1-4 in quality competition games outside of Rupp Arena. And the one win they had was against a mediocre team a Michigan team out in London. Nothing about their team camaraderie, the chemistry, how they, present themselves in, last season is the greatest example. They go to Lawrence to take on Kansas, a top 5 team at the time, and they're laughing at the crowd. They're getting into it, and you could tell they were mentally engaged. They were locked in, ready to beat the heck out of Kansas, and that's exactly what they did. Went out and beat them by 30 on their own home floor. Nothing about this team indicates that they are ready to make that type of statement. I thought kind of the same thing against Alabama. Okay, yeah, you struggled a little bit earlier on the year. You didn't get to make a statement at Gonzaga or in the Champions Classic against Michigan State or in the CBS Sports Classic against UCLA. Those opportunities were there, and then they crumbled. I thought they were going to get that same chance down in Tuscaloosa against Alabama. Absolutely the worst performance we've seen up to that point, and then we get what we saw against South Carolina. So I like your all's optimism and how it sounds on paper, but I can't say that I share the same.